All right, so in this video, I'm going to talk about my favorite drum sander. Well, my only drum sander. So I want to cover some of the tools in my shop now that I've had a lot of them for over a year. And today I want to focus on the drum sander and why I think the drum sander is a good investment for your shop. Now they're not cheap, that's for sure, but they do save you a ton of time and you end up using them in all kinds of ways. Now the one I have here is the SuperMax 1938 drum sander, which means it's 19 inches wide and you can actually go twice that amount by flipping this little lever here, which allows it, instead of being perfectly parallel, it's a little bit like that, so that when you flip a frame or you flip something around, run it through and then flip it and run it through, it leaves a nice even overlapping line so it doesn't dig into it. Now this particular sander has a nice heavy duty motor. It's 110 volt. They do have another one I think that's right below this, which is a nice one also, but I did go with this one. And I picked this particular brand over a lot of the other ones like the Jet. I looked at that, but a lot of the other drum sanders had a lot of plastic on them, and I didn't want a lot of plastic. Now, this thing, really, the only plastic that it has is right here. I mean, outside of that, there might be little pieces of plastic like the knob here, but all the rest of it is metal. And inside, it's a nice solid metal drum, metal bulb, everything's metal. So that's what I liked about it. I know that this thing just felt to me like it could stand up to use, and I've put it through a lot of use. Now these little tables here at each end, they flip down and up, and they're an extra, it might be a couple $100. I don't know what the exact price is. And I'll leave some prices below here. But these tables here really do add to it. It comes without them, and you just have the belt, which you can work with. But I do like having the tables where you can set stuff before you run it on through. All the adjustments, the height adjustment is made here. It has a little setting here that allows you to adjust it up and down to figure out exactly where you're going to be hitting the drum sander at. The drum sander takes these type, and I got a lot of stuff on the shelf here. I actually bought this particular stand to go with it because it's on wheels, and it's nice solid sand, and it has a shelf down there, so of course if I have a shelf I fill it up. But you can buy this either in a larger roll and then cut them to the length that you need, or you can buy them pre-cut, which is what I do, and I have this one labeled. This is an 80 grit roll, but you just roll it off and then put it back on, just winding it on. It has two clamps. You start with the clamp here and you start winding it onto the drum and then clamp it off at the end here. So it's relatively easy to change the sandpaper grit. Now, what can you use this for? Well, as I just said, you can use it for finish sanding of stuff, or it's just flattening down wood to the size that you need if it doesn't require too much. But also just running all the pieces through at one time to make sure that they're all nice and level or all the same thickness. So especially in this video here, I'm running a lot of sticks through that I want them all to be the same thickness. You can also put a heavier grit and grind down some stuff. We had a friend of mine had a large table he was making, and he had a really thick slab of wood that we needed to square up. So we attached it onto a flat piece of board because it wobbled a little bit, so we had made some adjustments and shimmed it up so that it stayed level. And we were able to use this to flatten one side, and then once we had one side flattened, we could flip it on over and go through. And for that we used, I think, 60 grit, and then we went down to 80 and then 120. So it went relatively quick. Now sometimes I have a tray made up down here that you can see in the video that I use when I do any type of turning, and I make segment pieces, and I put these segment pieces all on that and I run them through all at the same time. And then speaking of segment bowls, when I run the segment of bowls through here, that gets them all the same thickness, so that when you glue them all together, all of those layers of the segmented pieces are all the exact same size, and there's no difference, and it's pleasing to the eye. Not that you really notice a really minute difference, but it just does help make everything look really good. So the other thing that this is great for is face frames. If you put face frames together, you can sand them nice and smooth on this. Just a lot of things. It makes any type of flat sanding. If you do any type of cutting boards, things like that, this is the thing for you. But I like it just to get a finished sand on a lot of pieces before I start putting it together. Like I did the face frame on a bookcase that I made, or that one for the Warhammer pieces. And so once you cut them, you have the saw marks on the edges there, and instead of sanding all them down individually or once it's all together, I just ran them all through on the edges through the sander, and with a fine grain or fine grit, and it gave the edges, the inside edges and the outside edges of that face frame, a nice smooth, even trim to them. And so now I'm able to glue them up, and all the inside is already pre-sanded for me, set to go. So it saves a ton of time. So I think the main thing about this is it saves you a lot of time. You can do everything you do on this with, vibrating sanders or belt sanders, but this does save you just the time, and it gets it level in a way that is really difficult to do with a belt sander. Like if you use a belt sander to shim down or to flatten up a cutting board, for example, it takes some skill to get it perfectly level. I mean, over time you do learn how to do that, but it does take a little bit of work to make sure that it gets nice and level. This, you just keep running it through until it's nice and level, everything's sanded smooth, and you're good. And like everything else, you run a pencil mark over something, run it through. Once that pencil mark's completely gone, you're pretty much flat. So this is really a good investment. Now, does it replace a planer? No, I think you still want the planer to, get your boards down to the size that they need to be. You can take much bigger cuts. Running it through sandpaper, you can put burns on the sandpaper, which translates to burns on your wood. So you want to use this mainly for most of your finish work, or if you do grind something down when you have to, you're going to use a 60-80 grit, and it does take a little bit of time to get those scratches out. But with this, it does save you time. All you're doing is just running it through. You're not holding a belt sander trying to get that all out of there. So would I recommend a drum sander for your shop? I absolutely would. I think a drum sander is a great thing to have for your shop, something that you want to invest in. I would highly recommend the SuperMax tools. The 1938 that I have here has been a fantastic drum sander. It's solid. It's built solid. It really holds up to a lot of stuff going through it. And granted, I'm not a commercial shop, or I'm not doing as much work as maybe the guy who's working every day at this wood, but I do run a lot of wood through it, and for me it has worked out just perfect. So I'm really happy with this investment. One of the better investments I think I made in the shop as far as peripheral equipment. Once you get past the basic saw, table saw, and you're looking for other equipment to add to the shop, this is definitely worth the investment. So I hope that helped you out. If you are thinking about getting one of these, I would recommend it. But again, it's always your choice on your shop. It's just my opinion on this stuff. You can choose to believe that or not, but I do try to give you an honest look at what I have. And like I said, I've used this for over a year, and I'm still extremely happy with it, and very happy with most of my investments that I've made on my tools in my shop. So I will cover some other tools later on, but thanks for watching this one. If you do like the channel, please do subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again.